This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
South Korea's defense ministry on Tuesday signed a land swap deal with Lotte Group for the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, despite opposition at home and abroad. What does this deal mean for the timetable of THAAD deployment? THAAD installation looks certain to harm mutual trust between Beijing and Seoul. What actions might China take in response?
We will have to take all measures necessary to protect our own interest. China welcomes foreign enterprises to invest in China and will protect their legal rights. However, foreign companies in China must abide by Chinese law.
The Chinese public has begun to boycott Lotte Group and other South Korean goods after the land swap deal. Could trade disputes or international arbitration follow? This development marks a new round of strategic maneuvering between China, Russia, and the United States. Are U.S. objectives clear? How will Russia respond to the threat from THAAD deployment?
South Korea's military has formally signed a land swap deal with the Lotte Group for a site to host the THAAD missile defense system. This opens the way for deployment to go ahead despite the objections raised by China and Russia and protests by its own citizens. To discuss THAAD's suitability for purpose, diplomatic tensions on the Korean Peninsula, and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Yang Xiyu, Senior Fellow with the China Institute of International Studies.
We'll have a multidimensional crisis because THAAD in South Korea will open a way for building up a regional missile defense system that will break strategic balance between China, U.S. and Russia, U.S.
And we'll be joined by Harvey Zordin, freelance columnist for China Daily.
Thank you, Kim Jong-un. Under your leadership, you've achieved the impossible by potentially bringing together the U.S. and China to undo the mess that you've created.
On the phone, we shall be joined by Chong Chung-hoo, Senior Research Fellow of Korea Institute for National Unification. For the second half of the program, when we come back, we'll be joined by Tao Jingzhou, Managing Partner of the law firm DPRK LLP China, to address the legal consequences arising from the possible boycott against the Lotte products and business stakes in China. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Ray. Gentlemen, with the golf course site now ready to be cleared for the deployment of THAAD, what does that mean for the timetable of the system to be operational?
Well, two timetables. Number one, the so-called largest scale of military drills between South Korea and the U.S. Will be started, and in which the so-called THAAD system will be exercised. That means the U.S. will shape the whole system from the other side of the Pacific to this side. But what about after the drill? U.S. plans to leave this system in South Korea. So before the drill, they must get the land. So that is the schedule why the deal was made right before the drill. And the other schedule is the THAAD in South Korea is just the first step for building up a regional anti-missile system for the United States. And without the first step, that will be no way for the regional system. So it's urgent for U.S. to implement the first step.
How serious will be the system for THAAD to be operational?
It's created a lot of problems around the world because it set off alarm bells. The THAAD system, if it becomes operational, will create a new arms race because China and Russia will move ahead to create weapons to neutralize this system There's already talk of Japan getting THAADs as well. That's going to further aggravate the situation. It's a terrible first step.
Now, gentlemen, one of the major reasons for the Third World War not to happen, despite the severity of the Cold War that lasted for decades since the end of the Second World War, is, I'm afraid, the balance of terror, or what we call the deployment of mutually assured destruction, MAD policy. Today, with the missile shield programs deployed in Poland and Czech, on the western side of Russia, and the THAAD deployment in South Korea and our nose in Northeast Asia, do you think such mutually assured destruction policy or equilibrium is likely to be broken, and therefore security scenario will be quite fragile in this part of the world?
Yes, more fragile than before. Actually, you've described the geopolitical picture for us. Say, U.S. has built up the so-called West Wall of anti-missile system along Russia's west border. And now they turn to the east, want to do the same, say the east wall of the anti-missile system. So the so-called NMD is actually the GMD, Global Missile Defense. But ironically, NMD built up beyond the national territory of the United States. They built up both of the wall at the other side of the oceans for U.S. security. And politically and strategically, that means the allied nations with the United States will be abducted in the strategy. But the more important thing is when the walls, both of the walls were built up, you mentioned that the balance of terror will be break, and the imbalance will favor for U.S. That will trigger and force Russia and China to do something to respond.
Your analysis is even more one more step further in enlightening our viewers about the NMD, or National Missile Defense Program, which could be part of Ronald Reagan's STAR Strategic Defense Initiative back in 1983 at the height of the Cold War. Now let's take a closer look at what is called American exceptionalism. America, or the United States, is said to be pretty lucky because it's protected by the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean on both sides, and then north is Canada, south Mexico. Both are friendly and weak neighboring countries. So you have been able to escape from the atrocities of the two world wars. Now you would not sit back enjoying this. Also prefers to have the offshore balancing strategy with the deployment of THAAD as well as the missile shield programs along the western part of Russia. The United States wants to guarantee that it's 100% sure and safe with the name of protecting allies in both Europe and Northeast Asia. What do you think of this kind of world leadership, and that threatens to spell disasters for other countries?
I think the THAAD deployment will set in motion some activities that may not be able to be controlled. So I question that leadership. We had some progress when we had the six-party talks years ago, and I think it's much better to talk and negotiate and reach a solution on this serious problem with DPRK than start building up missiles, because the only winners are going to be the military-industrial complex, and they should not be the winners.
Thank you very much. And let me cross over to our South Korean commentator who's standing by on the phone. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Hi. The Chinese government is expected to respond strongly to the deployment of THAAD, and perhaps ordinary folks in China will respond angrily to the land deal between Lotte Group and the military in your country. How do you assess the consequences which may spin out of control between our two countries?
Well, you are right. It is very difficult for South Korea to control the China's retaliation in terms of economic sanctions, you know. But for South Korea, the most priority, the most important thing is to secure the South Korean national security. So South Korea is forced to prepare for the upcoming North Korea's threat, increased North Korea's threat with the nuclear bomb and the IBRB, intermediate range, missile threat. So we have no particular choice, even though there will be a China's
Mr. Choi, we understand the security dilemma of our friends in South Korea. However, there's strong concern or very strong doubts on the Chinese side that the THAAD missile program would only be used to protect the American military presence in the Korean Peninsula. Your capital city, Seoul, will be within the easy reach of artillery from the DPRK. So the THAAD program will fail to protect your capital city. So what you call the SHIELD program that is meant to protect the whole country of South Korea, in fact, will be only used to protect the American troops. What do you think of the concerns from the Chinese perspective?
Well, actually, in order to protect South Korea against North Korea's nuclear threat, that actually we need some kind of nuclear bomb. But in international norms, the United States and China reject South Korea's going nuclear.
What
so
you talk, I'm sorry, what you say is actually an issue of security assurance from your ally, the United States, the superpower. However, one man's meal is another one's poison. If you take THAAD as your security assurance, that's likely to cause a second round of threats from your neighboring countries like China and Russia. Both are very unhappy about the deployment of THAAD. What do you think of the consequences? Do you think THAAD will help find a solution? Or do you think the solution itself will be a troublemaker tomorrow?
Well, we don't want to be a troublemaker against China and Russia, but the most important thing is North Korea has a bomb, so we needed to prepare for the North Korea's nuclear threat. So there is no particular option for South Korea to to be against North Korea. So we have to have strengthen some alliance system.
Excuse me, Mr. Choi, to my knowledge, you have many options on the table. The use of force to have preemptive strikes could be one of the most viable options on the table. But thank you very much for being part of this dialogue. Thank you for being with us. Welcome back.
Okay, thank you.
President Donald Trump says it's within our power to easily stop the nuclear testing or deployment of missiles, whatever nuclearization in the DPRK. Is that so?
Well, it's groundless. Everyone knows the root of North Korean nuclear issue, the complex of nuclear issue, does not lie in China, but lies in the security contradictions between between North Korea and the ROK backed by the United States. Say, if we really want to address and solve this issue, we need to address the root. So whenever you say, oh, China can do something, China can do this thing and that thing, that's totally wrong. We should say the root issue should be solved. That the key for the problem lies in American hands, South Korean hands, and the North Korean hands.
What do you think of the blame game? Who is the egg? Who's the chicken? What's the relationship between the two?
I think rather than playing the blame game, we need to get the parties together and forcefully talk about this.
But the six-party talks has actually come to a halt, and it's moribund. It won't work. What about the new security mechanism that may work?
But now we have a president in America who can play North Korea's game, and that is to be unpredictable, to threaten, and so on. And North Korea has small potatoes in terms of its weaponry and even its large army compared to ours. So I think Donald Trump can beat North Korea at their game. And I want to add one more thing. While we're focusing on the nuclear issue here, there are other issues that are not discussed that push us towards having a full and robust discussion, whether it's 6 parties or 3 parties or X parties, and that is the threat of chemical and biological weapons. We saw what the North Koreans could do to the half-brother of Kim Jong-un, Allegedly, the North Koreans have a huge amount of chemical stockpile. They could easily deliver these into South Korea by drone. So we're not addressing one of the key holes that needs to be addressed.
Yes, indeed, the whole world was shocked by the brutality of the regime, according to Western reports. Now, Xi, what do you think of the actual functions of the THAAD system? Can you explain us effectively and briefly? Because many of our viewers have been wondering what the THAAD thing is all about. They don't know.
Well, firstly, I disagree with our South Korean's friends' argument. You introduced the phone call. And some of South Korean friends argued they have to have THAAD because they want to guarantee their security. But in fact, THAAD, the coverage of THAAD is about 200 kilometers. And that covers exactly, perfectly all U.S. bases in South Korea. And you mentioned, so how about Seoul, which is highly populated? More than 1/4 the population of whole South Korean people live in that area, but that is not covered by THAAD. So whenever you say, oh, THAAD is guarantee for South Korean people, no, that's a guarantee for U.S. troops. So that is a need for the United States, not a need for the South Korea. So that's the issue. And then number two, the key factor why China and Russia have a serious concern, opposition about that, because of the X radar that locates in South Korea, say very close to China and Russia. If they connect the X radar in South Korea and the S radar in Korea at Alaska, that means the whole strategic balance between U.S. and Russia, U.S. China will be broken.
We only have 2 minutes. Can you explain to us the effectiveness and functions of the THAAD system? I was told that you have some graphics to illustrate.
Well, the illustrator can tell us that the THAAD can play a fundamental role to help U.S. monitor the almost whole course of the strategic ballistic missile, either launching from China and from Russia. But for Russia and China, we have no such balancing measures. Say we cannot detect and follow U.S. ballistic missile from the other side of the globe. So now both sides have a radar system at each side of the globe. Now U.S. add one more radar system in the other side, our side of the globe. So that is the fundamental threat for China and Russia's strategic retaliation capability. That's the key reason why China and Russia oppose that. So if we discuss this scenario, there's no relationship, there's no business to South Korea. Unfortunately, South Korea leave a very valuable stepstone for the United States to do that. And I mentioned this is the first step. We will see the several other THAAD systems in this region, and then they will build up a wall as an anti-missile system, just like U.S. has done in the European land. And finally, we will see at both Europe and Asia, there will two anti-missile systems controlled and served for the United States.
That will be the twin sister on both fronts to fight what the United States may consider their potential enemy. With that, we come to the end of the first part of our program, addressing the issue of a THAAD deployment, which is a very serious missile shield program targeting not perhaps the DPRK, but eventually China and Russia. When we come back, we'll be joined by Tao Jingzhou, a lawyer, to address legal concerns about a possible boycott against the Lotte group. Stay with us.
CGTN shows you more, providing a fresh global voice you can trust.
And a different look at the world you won't find anywhere else.
We offer unparalleled coverage of Asia, Africa, and Latin America.
We present diverse perspectives on news and newsmakers from around the world.
We want
want to engage our viewers with stories that represent the complete picture.
We want to share with you ideas that matter to us all. The stories, the people, the issues.
A new and balanced perspective.
CGTN. See the difference.
Triangle, circle, or both? A story can take on a whole new meaning when looked at from a different perspective. I'm Liu Xin. Join me as I seek the hidden truth, asking direct questions to get answers that are to the point. Challenge your perceptions, Monday through Friday on CGTN. And get to the point.
Welcome back. Obviously, there is a rise of nationalist sentiments on both sides, the ROK and China, with regard to the latest land swap between the Lotte Group, which has extensive business stakes in China, and the South Korean military. This has seriously angered the general public in China. They were talking about a possible boycott against the products of Lotte. That will be a serious blow, I believe, to our business partner of Lotte Group. However, China joined the WTO back in the year 2001, and to my knowledge, the South Koreans vowed to go to the dispute settlement mechanism to seek international arbitration. I'd like you to first of all brief us about the legal consequences and risk. I'd like to have your risk assessment about the possible strong boycott.
Indeed, there are different layers of responsibility. We have to be careful. Of course, for ordinary consumer, if they do not want to buy Lotte product, there are no any liability whatsoever. But for the company, they have a contractual relationship with Lotte. By breaching that contract, Lotte may looking for the commercial responsibility for compensation. Then the issue of the government, to which degree the Chinese government may be sued, either by South Korean government or by Lotte company itself. So there are two kind of lawsuit which may be available to South Korea. For example, South Korean government can well attack Chinese government in WTO, basically say that their company in China was not treated properly because under the WTO you have a national treatment, meaning that you have to treat the South Korean company as well as your own company. Then you also have a most favored national treatment, meaning that you should treat South Korean company as well as any other foreign company operating in China.
Is that the level playing field of
Right.
national treatment?
Right. National treatment and MFN. So this is one thing. Second is, Lotte may also have some kind of a possibility to sue Chinese government because you know that China, South Korea signed a bilateral investment treaty. Under this treaty, a company which considered they were not well treated, they can lodge arbitration in Washington, D.C. with an organization called ICSID. So they might well go to ICSID to sue for this disturbance of their business.
As you said very well at the beginning of your analysis, it is one thing to have public anger. It is quite another to have official response from the Chinese government to openly boycott the products of Lotte, which is a major company in ROK. Let's look at the response from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. To my knowledge, they said something like the Chinese government still encourages all overseas companies to freely conduct their businesses according to the law. But they understand the public anger about the THAAD program. So eventually, it's the public anger and their strong boycott that will hurt the business stakes and interests of Lotte. In that case, what do you think of the legal risks and consequences?
I think individual initiative, there are no any issue of concern.
Yes, it's spontaneous reactions from the general public.
However, if it's a government behavior or a conduct which may attributable to the state, will be according to a theory of attribution of conduct, then you may engage government responsibility. So, for example, state-owned companies should be careful. Local government in dealing with the Lotte issue also should be careful, and otherwise, the Lotte may, put together evidence showing that they were badly treated in China, and therefore they were looking for compensation. Because the Lotte, if they suffer some, business loss, if they're not going to decide to quit China, they may not want to go to exit arbitration. But if they feel that they have nothing to lose, then eventually they will try to, make trouble with the Chinese government.
Jingzhu, you seem to be like the defense lawyer of a Lotte group. However, what do you think can be done by Lotte at this moment to minimize their risks? Do you think it's an easy job for them to turn down the offer from the South Korean military and say, look, I have to protect my business stakes in China, which says I would not escape without being punished?
That will be very, very difficult, almost a mission impossible, because any, country, if it's for military or national defense concern, a government can expropriate, the property. So Lotte may have a very difficult case to fight with South Korean government to, get this land turned back to them.
Well, we do not believe that Lotte will go bankrupt as a result of this land deal and the boycott from mainland China. But what kind of lessons can we learn from a similar arrest and a strong public protest back in 2011 after the Noda government of Japan decided to purchase the Diaoyu Islands? And their decision immediately triggered an outburst of public anger and dissent in mainland China.
Yeah.
Therefore, we saw the sabotage of Japanese-made automobiles, their restaurants were under threat, so on and so forth. So what can we learn from that chapter of history?
I think that, of course, people should be able to demonstrate their anger, their unhappiness, but they have to try to make it within the limit of the law, and not try to sabotage the property, and not to give too hard time to foreign investors in this part of the world. In any event, Lotte employed over 10,000 Chinese employees. So by hurting Lotte, we also self-infringed something towards our own people. So that's why we have to be careful to balance expression of the anger in one hand and a certain kind of self-control on the other hand.
There will be casualties, there will be destruction given the size of the public anger. The last question is very much about the liability of those who may have violated the law in expressing their anger and protest. Of course, it's their right to demonstrate their anger, to show their patriotism.
Yeah, you have a civil liability and criminal liability. Civil, if you breach a contract, maybe the court or arbitration institution will hold the company, civilly, liable. And the criminal is if we do something which is sabotage others.
Thank you very much. That's the end of this edition of Dialogue. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.